Hi, everyone. I'm Connie Zabel-Schmucker, Advocacy Director at Bicycle Garage Indy. Thank you very much for joining us for the Lunch and Learn. And I'm just a couple of housekeeping things. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we'll answer them after Roy goes through his presentation about riding in the cold and dark. And this is our last Lunch and Learn for 2022. So if you have any suggestions for future programs, also feel free to put those in the chat so that we can start planning for next year's programs. The Lunch and Learns are presented by Bicycle Garage Indy, Bike Indianapolis, and Commuter Connect and Central Indiana Bicycling Association. So we look forward to doing these again next year. Probably still doing it via Zoom because we're actually getting a lot of participation with our Zoom programs, as well as we can record them and have them available for people to watch at a later time if they can't come when they're actually being done. So with that, Roy is a year-round commuter, so he has lots of tips and all sorts of great things he has found out over the years about how to ride in all sorts of weather. So I'm going to turn it over to Roy at this point, and I'll monitor chat. So Roy, I may interrupt you if people have a pertinent question to what you're currently doing. Otherwise, do the Q&As afterwards. And if everybody can mute themselves so that we don't have any extraneous noise, that would be great.
Yeah, I went ahead and launched the meeting on my iPhone. I'm on my iPhone as well, so I pulled up. I have the chat visual on my phone, so great. I should be able to see some questions as we go along here. So yeah, so I'm Roy Sparks. I'm part of a bike commuting group called the Fall Creek Flyers. We commute to work year round. Although it does, the numbers dwindle a little bit after the time change, but. So I've been commuting. I work for Lilly. I've been commuting to work since 2016, and probably have since that time when I moved to Indianapolis. I probably have like 13,000 miles of commuting in. And in the winter, I probably commute to work anywhere from 8 to 10 times a month, depending on snow and ice. If it's a lot of snow or packed snow or ice, I ride inside, but for the most part, if the paths and roads are clear, I ride to work. So if some of the participants participated last year, I did a very similar presentation last year, although I have expanded it to add some more information based on some of the questions that we got last year. So I'm going to give you a lot more information about the specifics on what I wear and why I wear it, along with links that you can go to pull up this pieces of gear that I use when I'm riding in the winter. So I'm going to cover the 4 L's of riding in the cold and dark. We're going to talk about layers. We're going to talk about lights. We're going to talk about logistics, and then we're going to talk about the 4th and most important thing: learning to love riding in the cold and embracing why you should embrace that. So there's a company called 45 North out of Minnesota, and they have a pretty comprehensive guide on their website, which I've got the link here that you can go to, and they break it down by temperatures. So all you have to do is Google 45 North, and if I can switch over to that website real quick, there you go. Hopefully everybody sees that. This is the 45 North website. I'm not going to go through this, but I just wanted to highlight this. So it's a good reference. Their employees, this is their employees' opinions, and they break it down into these temperature ranges. So, obviously in Indiana, probably the last 2 are the ones that most commuters will be riding in the winter. is 25 degrees and up. So that's a good place to start. I suggest you, if you haven't ridden in the winter, go to this website and check it out. They've got a lot of good tips for everybody. Before we get going on layers, I always suggest everyone to keep a log. If you're going to commute winter to winter, you're going to forget what worked for, at least I do anyway, even though I've been doing it year to year. When I first started, you come into the next winter and you're like, oh, what was I wearing when it was 45 degrees? What was I wearing when it was 35 degrees? And so, if you're first starting out, keep a log, take some notes somewhere, so when you dial in what works for you, you'll have it all ready to go the next season in the winter. The other thing is, when we get to talking about specific gear, some of these pieces are quite expensive. And I always advise everybody, try using some of the gear you already own, whether if you're a skier or if you're a runner and you run in cold weather. Try using gear you already own. That helps defray some of the expense, and then add pieces over time. That's what I do. So I'll wait till off season or things go on sale, and I'll add a base layer here or a base layer there or a new set of gloves every once in a while. That way you don't have to front out a bunch of money. And then the last thing, don't overdress. That's key. Sweat's your enemy when you're commuting in the cold. So I always advise everybody, and many of you probably have heard this advice, that if you've dressed and you roll out of the garage and you're warm, you're going to sweat too much on the ride. You want be slightly cold, slight chill. For me, it takes me about 2 miles for my body to start producing enough heat where I warm up. So don't be afraid when you start out to be a little cold. Now, everybody's tolerance for cold is different. I have a pretty good tolerance for being cold, but I also overheat quickly. So layers. Now, these are my specific things and what I do, right, that I've developed over the last 7 years or so. First tip: get a good set of glove liners, smart wool. So you can come down here at the bottom of the screen. You can see I've added links for various pieces of gear that I use, and some gear that I don't use, but you could if you wanted to. I always use glove liners when it's below 50 degrees. I prefer wool glove liners. So Smart Wool makes a couple different versions of glove liners if you're interested in those. Anytime you can add layers to your gloves, you end up trapping air between the layers of gloves. And so in addition to the insulator properties of the layer, you also have the air gap that also keeps your hands warmer. When it's 45 to 50 degrees, I usually wear a light full finger glove with liners. Once it gets below 40 degrees, that's when I get out the big dogs. I get out the heavy winter gloves. And I always advise people, there's a link down here. I use a product from 45 North called the Sternfist 4. And my hands have never been cold, and I've ridden with those gloves and liners all the way down to like into the upper teens. I think like 17 probably is like the coldest I've ridden in to work. And my fingers have never gotten cold, and I ride about an hour. So that's my threshold, right? I try to stay warm for an hour. So they've been solid for me. They are salty. I said this last year, in my opinion, if you're not spending north of $100 on a set of heavy winter gloves, you're probably wasting your money. They're probably not going to keep your hands warm when you want them to keep them warm. The other things to keep in mind, that tight gloves are bad, right? Because it restricts the circulation in your hands and pushes the blood out of your hands. So you want to make sure that when you're getting gloves, really measure your hand, look at the size chart online. If you're not going to get them direct from a store, like REI carries the glove liners. They also carry the 45 North gloves. So try them on, make sure that they're not too tight. The other problem you can run into is if people have poor bike fit and they're really pushing on the bars with the palm of their hands when they're riding. That also restricts blood flow to your hands and makes your hands cold. One of the other options you can do is to get bar mitts or pogies. And I've kept the link here. What are we gonna? I don't know if that'll open up or not. I'll pull up that site real quick in case people want to see what a Pogey or bar mitt is. So this is bar mitt is a brand. Pogies are a general term from people up north, like Wisconsin, Minnesota. They refer to these, Canada, they refer to these as pogies. So they attach to your bars, and then you can wear a light glove in with that if you want to. So that's an option to getting heavy winter gloves, but you're probably going to spend, the same amount of money or more as far as purchasing those versus buying the heavy winter glove. Head coverings. This is what I wear. So if it's 45 to 50 degrees like it was this morning, so I went on a ride this morning, I wear a summer beanie, like Head Sweats, that kind of manufacturer, and I put a buff over the top of that. And that works really well, especially when you're in 40 to 50 degree weather. The closer you get to 50 degrees, I find that that's too much and I need to take the buff off. But if you're in the mid 40s, for sure, that combination works for me. Once I get in the low 40s or below 40, I don't use the summer beanie anymore. I just go straight to like a smart wool 2-layer beanie that I wear. Once it gets down around freezing, I'll put the buff over the top of that wool beanie. And then once we get below 25 degrees, then I don't use the lighter wool beanie and buff anymore. I go straight to a heavy wool beanie that's got some windstopper fabric on it. And so all these, I got links for the smart wool beanie and the buff and the heavy wool beanie. It's a 45 North hat called the stovepipe is what I wear when it's 25 degrees and below. Some folks, as an option, will get a helmet cover to put over the exterior of the helmet to trap some heat and to give them some protection from the wind. But I don't like to do that for a couple reasons. When we get to the light section, I always like to have a helmet strap for my light so I can put it on my helmet if I have to have a mechanical issue and it's dark. Also, I don't change helmets from summer to winter. I use the same helmet all year long. So I know there are some options out there for winter helmets or ski type helmets. So whatever works for you, but this is what I do. Feet, and I'm covering these, by the way, in the order of importance. Head, hands is most important, head, then feet. So feet coverings. So again, you get I use a pair of smart wool like crew socks, light cushion. I think they call them PhD light cushion socks that I wear when it's like in the 50s to mid 40s, like today. Once we get below 45 to the upper 30s, I switch to a specific winter wool sock. And down here, I put a couple links. There is a 45 North makes one, and then Rafa also makes a deep winter socks. That's the sock I use, and they're knee-high socks, so they go up just below your knee. Once we get down closer to freezing, I'll put a shoe cover over the top of my shoe. I ride flat pedals, so that gives me more flexibility in what kind of shoe cover I have. For commuting, I just clip it in and out. I did that for like the first 8 months that I was commuting, and it's too many stops, too many pedestrians, clip and unclip. It was just too much of a game. So I solely ride flat pedals on both my commuter bikes, and I use a Pearl Zumi Alpex flat pedal shoe. And so this is the shoe cover from Showers Pass that I use, that I zip over the top when it gets around freezing. Then once it gets below 30, I'll put a toe cover on my shoe first and then put the Showers Pass shoe cover on. And if it gets really cold, like below 25, like in the upper teens, I'll add a chemical toe warmer onto my shoe, put the toe cover on, and then put the Shower Pass cover on. And those generally, once you go to the chemical toe warmer, you can ride in pretty cold weather for an hour easy, is what I found. Torso. So like on a ride like I did this morning, you know, I use I did a short sleeve wool base layer from Smart Wool and a long sleeve wool jersey. And I find that works really well for me when it's in the 40s to 50-degree range. If it gets below 40, I end up adding a shell over the top of this combination. And I usually, because I dual purpose things, it's basically a lightweight rain jacket that I put over the top. But when it gets really cold, I have a heavier rain shell made by Showers Pass. Again, I got the links down here at the bottom. It's a refuge jacket, which is currently on sale, by the way, if anybody is interested in buying stuff on sale. And that has a lot more vents in it, so it helps me control, you know, body vapor coming off my torso and whatnot when I'm riding. And if it gets bitterly cold, I end up, I'll do a short sleeve wool base layer and a long sleeve wool base layer underneath this long sleeve jersey, and then add a shell. And that's pretty solid. I will tell you, as far as like the torso goes, that's the hardest for me to manage, because that's, you know, that's where you're producing a lot of your sweat and vapor. And if you get that wrong, I think I mentioned this last year, if you get out and you're riding a couple miles down the road and you're warmed up and you clearly have overdressed, and you're really sweating and you get these base layers wet, I find the most effective method, you don't want to take your shell off at that point because your layers are wet. You know, I just basically zip up all the vents and I go into what I call Dutch oven mode, and I just stay like that. And that is okay until you stop for a long period. It's okay when you're stopping for stoplights and crosswalks and all that, but as long as you're moving, you can stay warm with that method, you know, for an hour or so easy. The reason I use wool on my base layers is they have when they get wet, they hold their thermal properties better, so they can absorb a good amount of their weight in water and still maintain a thermal property. So that's the main reason I use wool. And again, you know, you get into these wool based layers, you know, you're talking $100 a pop typically for these wool based layers. So that's why I add pieces over time. And also, if you're like me, nobody knows what to get me for Christmas. And so if there's something that I want to try out or that I think can really bring value to me and improve my comfort, I just put it on my Christmas list and say, hey, when somebody calls and asks, here you go. Give me that. And so don't be shy. You know, if you're hard to buy for, here's some good opportunities to put stuff on your list. Legs. So legs are the least worrisome for me anyway. So I wear summer bibs and my leg warmers when it's in like 40, 50-degree range. Find that worked great. When it gets below 40, that's when I put on a winter bib tight. And when it gets really cold, I add a layer over that winter bib tight. These bike pants, they're kind of like bike specific sweatpants. And they're made by Showers Pass. You just want to make sure you got something. If you want to add a layer, just make sure, you know, it's not too baggy. That way you don't get it boogered up on your chain ring. But that's what I do when it gets really cold. I just add a bike pant layer over that to help trap heat on my legs. So that's my specific, what I cover on layers. Anybody got any questions about layers before we move on to lights?
There are no questions in the chat at this point.
All righty. Okay, well, moving on. So lights are obviously critically important, you know, to see where you're going and to be seen. I prefer handlebar mounted lights, right? But when I select, I use a Light in Motion is the name of the company. I've got two of those lights that I mount on my handlebars in case I need to use both of them. Or in case one of them dies, I have a second light. So that's that N+1. And this is really like focused on if you're riding by yourself, right? If I'm riding with a group of 3 other people, then I don't need 2 headlights on. You know, I just need one. So keep that in mind. If you're riding by yourself, I would recommend having 2 lights on your handlebars just in case. That way you have them available. The other thing I do is, the reason I did the light in motion is I bought the version that had the helmet strap. And so when it gets cold, it starts getting dark like this time of year in the morning, because sunrise is what, 7:40 or something, so I'm just about to work by that point. So most of my commute in the morning's in the dark. And so if you do have a flat tire or something, you have mechanical, being able to take one of those lights off your handlebars and mount it up on your helmet so your hands are free and you can see what you're doing. So if you're riding by yourself, that's a good tip, is to get the helmet strap for the lights you have, or make sure that at least you have that option when you select your light, that they offer that, so you can get it later if you want to. The other thing is, 1,000 lumens. That's probably the minimum standard. Most of them have various modes, but the max, I wouldn't bother getting anything less than 1,000 lumens. And usually these lights have like 3 different levels of settings and 1 or 2 flash modes, and so you can use it on flash modes in the day, which I find very effective. That's the other thing I would tell you is, like, if you're doing this for a commute in the winter and you're riding home in the daylight on the way home, make sure you put your lights in flash mode on your handlebars. I've literally had a couple close calls that I am convinced that they saw my flashing lights during the day and stopped. You get people turning right on reds and whatnot when they're not supposed to, especially downtown. And so it's always good to have a flashing light on your handlebars in the daylight. To be seen, again, I use flashing red tail lights. Super Flash is by Planet Bike is what I use. And again, I always have 2. Whether I'm using both of them or not depends. If I'm riding with others, if I'm by myself, I'll have both of them on. I have one attached to the back rack of my bike, my commuters, and then I'll clip one to my back pocket. Reflective elements, I always recommend a minimum 2-to-1 ratio to lights. So if you got 4 lights, you want at least 8 reflective elements on your body. Whether, most of this winter gear, especially if it's bike specific or running specific, will have integrated reflective elements in them. So make sure your outer layer has reflective elements. You can also add bands, reflective bands. They make those, so you can have those, put those on your arm. Like, one thing I found, like, if you're riding in the dark and you're turning left and you're sticking your arm out to signal traffic behind you that you're turning, if it's dark and you don't have any reflective element on the back of your glove or on your wrist, they may not know you're turning. They can't see it. So reflective bands are helpful. The other thing is you can get sticker packages for your bike, which I also use. Bikes, I think is how you say that. They make sticker packages in various red, blue, white, black, you name it, different shapes, triangles, hexagons. And so don't be afraid to add a couple stickers here and there on the rear and front of your bikes. I also make sure I run flat pedals that don't have integrated reflectors in them. I use Crank Brothers flat pedals, so I add a couple stickers on the front and back of those pedals too. I've been told that reflective elements that are in motion are easier for drivers to pick up. So if you have reflective elements on your back of your shoe or on your pedal or a band around your ankle, I think that's probably the best way to get attention from drivers. Logistics. So I'd say on logistics, any bike that you have is a good bike to ride in the winter. I don't know that I think I'd mentioned this last year. I don't know I'd go buy a specific bike to ride in the winter. If you have a road bike and you figure out what size tire you can put on there and still have clearance on your chainstay in the back, whether it's 25 millimeter or 28 millimeter. A lot of these disc brake bikes allow you to run a wider tire if you have a newer bike that has hydraulic disc brakes. So you could easily make a tire change for the winter, run something a little wider. The bigger, like if you're running 28s or 32s or 30s, heck, some of these bikes can even go up in the 40 millimeter clearance, especially if it's like more of a gravel specific focus bike. It allows you also to run slightly lower pressures, which increases the contact patch when you're riding in the winter. You all could also consider if your rims are tubeless ready, and you can have one of these bigger volume case tires. You could try out tubeless. That way, you're less worried about running over glass. I mean, depending on where you live in Indy, you know, people just throw stuff everywhere. So it's quite easy to pick up glass. I just cleaned some glass off the Fall Creek Trail from somebody who dropped their empty fifth of whiskey right in the middle of the trail this morning, north of 38th Street. So I got off my bike and spent 5 minutes cleaning glass off the trail. So tubeless is a good option if you're worried about getting a flat when it's, you know, if it's 25 degrees out and it's dark and cold and you're by yourself and you got to change a flat, you know, that's not fun. So tubeless is an option. Fenders, if your bike takes fenders, they're not necessary, but they're helpful, especially if it's wet. You know, these cold November rains, you know, keep spray off your feet, whatnot. Keep your bike cleaner. I also am very organized in my gear and laying my things out the night before. I don't do any ad hoc, just wake up and go grab gear and start going. I lay everything out the night before. I got a 2-story house, and so I take all the gear I'm going to wear and don. I lay it out we got a kitchen island, and I lay that all out the night before. Everything I'm going to take with me. You know, I use a small Pelican case for my wallets and things, my badge, phone. I lay everything out there the night before, so when I get up, you know, you're efficient. You know, because in the winter, putting all these extra layers, you need to allow extra time to put on shoe covers and whatnot. You know, it can add 10 minutes to your prep time versus getting ready for a summer ride. And then also, if you know, you got to decide whether you're going to get rechargeable lights and rechargeable taillights, or really going to, especially on the taillights, they still make a lot of them that run on AAA batteries. So I always carry a set of a 4-pack of AAA batteries for my taillights, just in case. I find that based on me riding, you know, 24 hours a month commuting to and from work, because I got an hour each way, hour to hour 10 each way. I just change out my batteries in my rear tail light at the beginning of every month, just out of habit. Learning to love it. So, you know, the easiest thing to get you going in the morning is making sure somebody else is going to meet you. You know, that's a great motivator. Peer pressure can be a good thing. So, you know, if you want to make sure that you get out of bed, you know, find somebody else that commutes and connect with them. And that way, when you get up at 5:30 in the morning and it's 32 degrees outside, you're like, oh, I better get up. You know, I got to meet Andy. You know, he's going to meet me at 6:30. I got to get going, you know, get that extra motivation to get out of bed. And it also makes it go quicker in the cold. You know, if you got somebody to talk with, whatever the conversation is of the day, you know, it makes the time go quicker. So you're less focused on cold and how cold you might be. And then, you know, having a ride buddy is also helpful. If you have a mechanical issue, you got somebody else there to kind of hold the light for you, or to help, you know, hold your bike or whatever, while you take your rear wheel off or front wheel off, whatnot. That's very helpful. So I always recommend it. It's not necessarily an easy thing to do, but with organizations like, you know, Bike Indianapolis and BGI, and you know, hopefully you can connect with a commuter group. That's very helpful. And then the other great thing about commuting in this dark is you see things you don't see during the day. Just in general, commuting, this is true. You know, especially if you're riding the trail system, you know, it's nobody else is out yet. It's quiet. You get to see all kinds of, this time of deer, I've seen like 2 big bucks so far this year in the last week. So it's fun. It gives you an opportunity to experience the city in a different way. And then the other thing, I mentioned this last year when I think Apple came out with iOS 15, they allowed you to create focuses on your phone. So I have a cycling focus on my phone that I turn on in the morning. And basically, it only has the apps that I use that are important to me for cycling, like Strava and weather, and the chat app. We use GroupMe with the Fall Creek Flyer. So I only have a few apps on my screen, and it it silences all the other apps as far as like notifications and whatnot. So I'm not bothered when I'm riding. And there you go. Have fun. There's the crew. We got about 9 people or so that ride with us at various times throughout the year. So, you know, make that connection with the community. You know, form your tribe, so to speak, and you'll enjoy your commutes, especially in the cold and dark, much more. So that's all I have.
Thank you.
Anybody?
Yeah, there were a
Questions?
couple of comments. So let me go back. So there was, somebody said there was white wall tires where the white is reflective on the entire tire.
Yep.
So
There are, let's see, I know
couple different brands. Schwalbe
Schwalbe,
does
yeah,
that.
Schwalbe makes them. Yeah, I
And
think you just got to go research it. I know there's probably, I'm guessing Specialized probably and Trek probably make a tire that has reflective sidewalls as well.
And then if you register with Commuter Connect, which is one of the folks that helps promote our lunch and learns, they can also potentially pair you with a bike commuter in your area. They also have a bike buddy program. So if you're just getting started in bicycling and you want to find out more, they can pair you with an experienced bicyclist that can help you find a good commuting route or good bicycling, bicycling tips, get you started on whatever type of bicycling that you'd want to do. So Commuter Connect, I think if you look them up.
Yeah, I would say that, yeah, Connie, your website too does a good job at helping connect you with, you know, bike commuters, indybikehub.org. Is that the?
Yeah,
guys, yeah.
indybikehub.org. Yeah, so that's actually, well, the information that's on there is going to be moved in the next several months to some pages. You'll still be able to find it by going to indybikehub.org, but it'll reside on bgindy.org or .com site
Okay.
in the near future. But all the information as well as all the archives for the previous lunch and learns will still exist, and you'll still be able to find them by indybikehub.org. Let's see, do you use any side facing flashers?
Well, I would, yeah, so that's really where that, for me, that's kind of how I use that. So I have one super flash rear tail light that I attach to the back of my rack. And then the second one, when I ride by myself, I turn that on. Rear jersey pocket as far over to the left as I can. So drivers, particularly, you know, when you're crossing these cross streets, drivers from the left are the first obstacle you're going to have to deal with. So that's what I do. I use that other light, clip it way on my left pocket so they can see me coming. And I also put, I think the reflective stickers and reflective elements on your bike, that's where also that comes into play, and the reflective sidewalls on your tires. Making sure that you are reflective from the side on both sides is important. So you can use stickers and tires to accomplish that too.
Yeah, when I was doing some riding at night, I had a monkey light, which, you know, flashes patterns. It's really fun. And it's on the spoke. You attach it to the spoke, and as the wheel goes around, it makes patterns. Unfortunately, I didn't use it for a while and the battery's corroded, so I can't use it anymore, which I have a second one. I just haven't replaced it yet. But they don't make those anymore. But you can find lights that you can put on your spokes or reflectors on your spokes for that side visibility. And that was one of the things that I was always concerned when I came up to a four-way stop at night and there's motorists. I can't tell whether there's they're motioning me to go on, or if they're waiting for me, or if they even see me. So sometimes I would move my handlebars just to shine the light towards them so they knew that I was there. But having side visibility is always helpful. Light recommendation, a bit too focused and smaller area, might not light up a broader thing. That's one of the reasons I also use light and motion lights. And that's one of the reasons I really like them, is because they, when I'm riding down the road, they not only light up the lane I'm in, but also part of the oncoming lane. So I can see quite a bit wide and far. I don't have very good night vision, but with the light and motion, even at the 800 lumen, I can see super well and don't have to slow down very much at all at night.
Yeah, I'd say the other technique that I'll use if you're worried about crossing busy intersections or cross streets is that's another great thing about having two bar mounted lights. Like when we cross 38th Street, for example, one of my lights, I'll switch it to flash mode as we come up to that intersection, so I can get the car's attention, because flashing lights, I think, get their attention really well, as I mentioned before. So, don't be afraid to use that technique either. If you got intersections that are kind of problematic and very busy in the morning, flip one of the lights over to super flash mode on your handlebar. So that way you make sure you get their attention, car's attention, as you're crossing through big wide intersections.
Yeah, so there's a couple of other resources. So I'll put, when this gets uploaded onto the YouTube channel, and I put the link on the indybikehub.org, I'll put links to the resources, and also there will be a link to Roy's presentation, which will have his links as well. So you'll be able to look at it and refer to it in the future. And if you have any additional suggestions for info for next year or programs for next year, feel free to email me. I'll put my email here. So email me or put it in the chat in the next few minutes. And we will look at what programs we want to do for next year. We usually do these between, when do we start them? February through October. And so this is our last one for the year, but we'll, in November and December is when we do our planning for the upcoming year. So we will be looking at which programs seem to resonate with people and which things we wish we had done this year and didn't get a chance to do. So any suggestions you have, that'd be great. So if no one has any additional questions, name of site to review that will be indybikehub.org. And someone also says they wear a reflective vest and vehicles spot them immediately. So yeah, I've seen, the construction vests that are neon, and then they have the reflective stripes. I've seen a lot of people use those as well, where it makes people very visible. And those you can find pretty easily. So, well, thank you very much, Roy, for the presentation, and thanks everyone for joining us. And we will see you when we start these up again. Take care.
All righty. Thank you.
Thanks.